Welcome to Dear Business Coach, the podcast. My name's Elizabeth. Find one thing to move your business forward today with conversations, spotlights, interviews, articles, and free resources. Listen and follow and subscribe on social media. Dear Business Coach pages and groups. Dear Business Coach podcast, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and don't forget Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, anywhere you listen to podcasts. All it takes sometimes is one little thing to move your business forward today. Hi. All right. And John Ensley, thank you so much for coming to the Dear Business Coach podcast today. How are you?
I am awesome. Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. Excited to be here.
Great. Yeah, I think that you and I were meant to talk. I have some pressing questions about risk and my feelings around risk and what are my realistic and unrealistic thoughts about that. And so, John, what we were just discussing before we hit record is where I can find you. And so while we're talking, I am on retirewellwithjohn.com. And so listeners know they can access that link as well from the notes in the article, as well as the Dear Business Coach podcast homepage. And I would like to just get a little brief introduction from you. I got to learn a little bit about some of your personal passions, but also you've been in business through some very transitional periods of technology and the way we do business. So pretty fascinating. And you are taking the time as well to share your lens about you have a unique perspective and are choosing to share your lens about how our ideas have changed and the reality has changed over a couple of decades. So thank you for coming to the podcast, John. Will you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, my name is John Ensley, and I am a chartered financial consultant. I'm a financial advisor. I started my practice in 2012. As you mentioned, I had some real sort of eye-opening experiences through the late 90s, early 2000s with the dot-com crash, and then a few years later in 2008 with the housing bubble crash. Those two events really kind of shaped a lot of my life since then. And as a result of that sort of wake up call and doing a lot of study and a lot of introspection and a lot of work personally, I started J. Ensley Financial in 2012, really out of a passion to want to help people just maybe think a little differently about how they approach finance and how they approach it's kind of interesting. No matter what our dreams are, there's a financial aspect to it. How do we get there, right? How do we pay for it? Those kinds of things. And that's kind of my passion, is how can we think differently about our dreams, about our life, and about how we finance them. And of course, that ties into retirement and all of these things. So I think one of the unique things I did in 2012 when I launched the practice is I decided from the get-go to practice what I preach, and it's 100% virtual practice. And so, I'm simultaneously kind of developing this lifestyle for myself, in that I wanted to travel, I wanted to do some things. As you mentioned, there I have some passions in my life. One of those is sailing, so that's also a part of my life and a part of my business life. And so, it's amazing to me when I look back that it's been, almost 15 years. I've been 12, 13 years now that I've been doing this. And, it's been awesome. I love what I do. I love helping people reach their dreams and goals, and living a pretty amazing life myself.
Hey, listeners, don't forget to subscribe to email if you haven't already. Do this at dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. And if you are a new subscriber, look for the magazine coming up. You can get a free download as a new subscriber. That's dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. Thanks so much, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, you are a superstar. Yes. Well, 2008 was a big deal for me too, so I have some real muscle memory around that one. And then 2012 is the time that is another year that comes up for a lot of people, and it's interesting, where you are in those two cycles, and they're so close together. So I know 2012. You probably were in the middle of learning how people were starting to see remote work as an option, but it's still kind of like you have to really sell it.
Yeah, yeah,
You-
exactly.
so
Exactly.
what were you
It's
seeing?
well, it's kind of funny. The technology was there, right? I'm not sure Zoom was around yet, but the technology was there, but it was still a little sketchy. It was still right, a little difficult. What the really funny thing to me was like uh, during COVID is where there was a big shift in terms of virtual. Prior to that, I would have to like painstakingly explain how to log into Zoom, how to right get your camera on, and you write all these
Mm.
kinds of things to clients or prospective clients that I was working with. Post COVID, you don't ever have to explain it, right? Everyone knows now how to get onto a Zoom or any other video platform. So there was a real shift, a huge shift that took place during that time frame. Um, but I think there's some nuances for people to get used to working with someone not face to face. And there's I think a whole series of tips and tricks we'll say when you're working virtually to use the technology, use the screen share, be able to demonstrate the conversation, because you do lose something in the personal aspect when you're not face to face with someone in terms of body language and intonation and things like that. But you can make up for some of that with some of the very detailed explanations you can give using visual aids on screen. So I think those are all important aspects. And of course, the technology continues to develop. Cameras are better, audio is better, the platforms are better, internet is faster, right? All of these things just keep progressing. I've done here in recent years. Last year, actually, I did a couple of podcast interviews like this from a boat on Starlink in the middle of the Sea of Cortez, right? So those kinds of technologies just keep advancing and opening worlds of opportunities from a lifestyle design standpoint, from a business standpoint of things that you can do.
Right. So when did you figure out that you actually can be 100% remote? I mean, you kind of
Yeah,
just answered the question, but in order to successfully interact with everybody else that you need to work with to make a living.
yep. I can tell you the exact moment that transition happened. And so back in at the build up to the 2008 scenario is also when I sort of really got passionate about sailing. I was spending as much time as I could sailing, and I had met a friend who had a boat in Mexico, and my boss at the time, I was working in industrial sales, and my boss at the time gave me a copy of The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And it sounds cliche, but it literally changed my viewpoint. There were a few things in that book. And and so I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, I'm going to take all 4 weeks of my vacation all at once." And of course, he freaked out. No, 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 you can't do that. I said, no, no, no. And also, here's the other thing. I'm not going to tell anyone I'm on vacation. And so I went down to Mexico and I got on a boat with my friend Jim, and I spent a month sailing from the Sea of Cortez down to Mazatlan, Mexico. And as soon as I got to Mexico, I got back then it was a little 3G internet dongle from my laptop, and I had Mexico on my cell phone plan. And I really didn't miss a beat as we were sailing. There were times when I didn't have good connectivity or whatever, but and then the actual moment came. We were in a marina in Mazatlan, and I had a call set up. It was a conference call. It wasn't even video, but it was a conference call set up with several customer contacts and several of my internal company contacts. There were like maybe 10 people on this call. And I was literally sitting on the foredeck of the sailboat with my laptop in my lap and my phone and a Bluetooth, and I did this whole call. We negotiated this contract, finalized everything, right, the whole 9 yards. And when I hung up the phone, it was like, okay, I need to change some things because this is totally possible, right? I can do business from anywhere with the way this works because I just put like a $2 million supply contract together from a sailboat in Mazatlan. And so that was kind of the switch. It took me a few years yet to get transitioned, but that was the moment when I knew this was possible. I just had to figure out how to do
That is so cool. And I'm kind of like right there with you in that aha moment. I can see it happening.
it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so right. And being able to use Starlink, for example, right? That sounds like, I mean, on a business call or any kind of situation where you're exchanging contractual terms and making those conversations happen, if you even drop signal for a second, I mean, you could lose you could lose your power to accept a yes or make the
that
deal happen. So that's really scary.
That is true. Yes, that is true, and it has happened, right? Where the call drops, the signal drops, whatever, and I think you always take the pros with the cons when you do something outside the box, and those are some of the risks. We were talking about risk a little while ago. Those are some of the risks that we take with doing business this way, and I think you can also prepare customers, prepare clients for that environment. And what I have found is most of the time clients, they kind of love it that you're doing what you're doing and you're doing something different. Um, and so they're pretty forgiving when the occasional thing happens where you lose a call or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Are you a LinkedIn user? If you are, you can join me for LinkedIn Live Audio with Elizabeth every week, usually on Mondays at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I will have a LinkedIn Live Audio where we talk about podcasting for executives who speak and podcasting for team leaders who speak. These are the themes that are currently running. If that sounds like something you're interested, visit me, Elizabeth Walker at Work, on my LinkedIn profile. Yeah. So, okay. So thank you. I wanted to sort of set up that context because there's I think there are some of us who say, "Oh yeah, that's we are there's everything is possible from just being able to connect with people, and we can certainly be maybe even better at our jobs for being able to reach out to each other this way and take the
Hmm.
traveling out of it." And then there might also be a perspective like, well, that is somebody who is really just trying to take all of the work out of things and not be held accountable or hide being accountable. And I don't mean to put you in those shoes of that conversation because we're here to listen to you tell us. I'm here to listen to you tell me about how you can how you can tell me what it means to retire well with John. But I already
Hmm.
have a propensity, or I should say, and I already have a propensity to want to explore that lifestyle of I can take my work with me anyway, anywhere.
Hmm.
That's what's so great about a podcast.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so you started your wheels started turning, and you could see and know firsthand that living and working remote is possible. And being on a financial wealth journey for yourself um, was tell me about choosing this line of work. What attracted you to um, wanting to be financially stable in this way,
Sure. And
or in this profession, I guess?
yes, how did I pick this profession? No, I
Yes.
totally understand. So it was finance has always kind of been a factor for me. It's always something I've thought about or been focused on to some degree. And so in the particularly in the '07, '08, '09 timeframe, was a real wake up call for me, not only financially, but personally, professionally, all these things. I'd kind of worked in the corporate world for quite a few years. But I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit and had owned businesses before. I owned a little bakery at one time, things like
Oh,
that.
cool.
Um, and so as I got into, as the crash happened in '08, I had this real estate project that I was subdividing and building and so forth, and it just all imploded, right? It was a disaster. And so I kind of financially, personally, professionally went into this sort of dark place. And then as I came out of that, I did a lot of work personally and a lot of study, and a lot of that was based in on finance. And what I discovered as I did a lot of that on the financial side of things was that I really hadn't considered that there were other ways to do things. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was kind of like most of us. I was kind of locked into what all the financial advisors had told me over the years, and what I read, most of what I read was all very conventional. You know, contribute to your retirement plan,
Mm.
build it up over 50 years or however long, and just kind of this path to retirement that most people think is the only path.
Mm-hmm.
And so suddenly I realized there were other ways and other ways to think about it. And one of those things I came across is called Bank on Yourself, or infinite banking. And it was unique. It was different than anything I'd ever seen before. And as I studied it more and understood it more, I got very passionate about that concept. And so there was kind of an intersection as we went through these period of years there, where I had this kind of awakening financially, but I also had this awakening personally, where I wanted to have some freedom and some adventure, and right, some of these kind of core values for me came to the surface on the personal work I was doing. And then professionally, it just that Tim Ferriss book 4 Hour Work Week was kind of the catalyst there to get me to realize that, okay, all of these things sort of intersected. And I was starting to get into sailing about that time, and all these things kind of intersected at once. And it just all of the, I just realized, you know what, this concept is awesome. I want to help people do this. I also want to have the freedom in my life to go explore this sailing experience, that traveling, and which is what that's all about, right? Is a unique way to travel and see things. Um, and at the same time, I can build a profession and a life. And in other words, I just realized I could do it all. I could combine it all together and it would work. And not that it was easy, right? I mean, when I first launched my practice, I fell flat on my face, right? It was a humbling experience. I had to kind of go back to work at a job for a while and get back on my feet, and then
Mm.
kind of figured it out. So it wasn't that it was all ducks and bunnies, but I did figure out that it would work, and I just kept at it. And and I'm, to this day, right, continuing to make it work.
Yeah. Now you actually seem like somebody to me that, um, you seem like the person who is going to ask me, what do you really want to be doing with your time? And
Uh-huh.
if, as a financial advisor, financial planner, this is one of the most important types of questions to consider, and that's why I'm so interested in your in this life that you have in the sailing world, and why that is partially a huge driving factor. You are seeking something out of life, and so recognizing that there can be stability involved with that. So John is sailing the world and that seems so scary. And don't you have to, get a divorce and get rid of your house and never talk to your kids again to do something like that, right? So I'm also looking at you going, well, I'm sure that you've had to make some weird sacrifices. And two, maybe that's attainable for you, but not for me. And so, but I'm getting the sense from you that you are saying, wait, we want to create a design here, or that's what I'm
Mhm.
seeing from you.
Exactly.
So if I am going to say, all right, I believe you, um, what do I do to take a look at my path going forward? Maybe I have um, well, me personally, Elizabeth Walker, I can share. I have one home that is a rental. That's kind of, the jumping off point, I guess. So I still think I have to be physically attached to my investments in order to know that they're doing okay, be a good steward of it, and be actually part of the day-to-day in and out workings of what that asset is doing if I expect to make sure it continues to be an asset for me.
Right.
So what are some of the things you might ask me to look at as far as like my financial risk? What am my comfort level? What are those words that you want to use with me? How would you start that conversation with me?
Yeah, great question. You are absolutely right. The very first question I would start with is the very first question that I would.
Sorry about that.
That's
That
all
was
right.
my fault. Okay. Let's pretend that
You
didn't happen.
Okay, no problem. So the first question I would begin with is kind of what you mentioned a moment ago: is what do you want your assets to do for you, right? What's the vision? What's the design? And I think the point is it's unique to you, right? Your experience isn't going to be my experience, so I want to know what's the ideal experience for you. One of the things that I think happens with finance is we know that time is the number one factor, the number of years that we have to accumulate. And so we think about it in terms of like there's some unlimited amount of time. But I
Mm,
think we also have to rein that in and go, well, okay, well, let's say that you knew somehow you looked into a crystal ball and you knew that you weren't going to live past 74. Does that
okay.
change your perspective at all? Or you look into the crystal ball and you knew you're going to live to be 108. Does that change the
Mhm.
perspective at all? And so my job isn't to tell people what to do. My job is to get them to think, right? That's what I do as a financial advisor is think about your life, think about what you actually want out of it. Because only once we have at least a picture, and that picture will change. We know that. We want at least a picture of what that looks like, because that's the only way we can know how to structure the assets and the tools, the financial tools to to create that. If we don't know what that vision is, then it's kind of like if you don't know where you're going, any road will do, right? So we kind of need to know where we're going so we know what road to take to get us there. So that's where I always begin. And that's where, you mentioned retirewellwithjohn.com. That's a landing
Yes.
page, and it's a free analysis that I offer. And that's because, I think in our world we can get so focused on accumulating clients, right? We're just trying to sell. And I try not to take that approach. So I put something out there that's free. It gives people information about themselves. So it includes the RESA survey, Retirement Income Style Awareness Survey, which is a psychology-backed income personality assessment that was put together by two of the top PhD retirement income researchers in the country. I make that available so that it takes about 15, 20 minutes to fill it out, and it will give you insight into who you are and what makes you the most secure in terms of retirement income. Included in that retirement pathways analysis is what's called a MyRisk IQ 3D. It's a very unique risk assessment that doesn't just analyze. Most risk assessments you take with most financial advisors analyze your willingness to take risk. This assessment gives you a score on willingness, ability, and need. The three different levels of risk. So it's very insightful. And so those are the two main surveys. There's a couple others there, as well as a basic financial questionnaire. And all of that culminates in a 1 hour consultation with me where we just look at the results and talk about it. And if someone's a good fit, then maybe they become a client. But my point with the retirement pathways analysis is kind of what you're getting at. It answers these big questions on the front end so that we can then have a relevant conversation about what financial tools, what assets you have, how you should be looking at those to do what you want to happen in your life, right? So it's much bigger than what kind of rate of return am I getting, or which stocks to buy, or those are the kind of the mundane things that we really can't intelligently discuss until we get some of these big questions answered. And it takes a little time and a little engagement. And so that's where that analysis comes from, is I wanted to put something out there that's valuable. If you don't become a client, you still walk away with very valuable information that you can go use however you want to use.
Yeah, the psychology, the psychology factors are pretty important, right? I could have you talk to me about how risk averse I am, and when I chatted with you in our meet and greet, I said, I think I'm a little more conservative than the average person for my age. Or another way of saying that is, for my age, I think I'm probably supposed to be more aggressive in my investing. And I'm just not comfortable with that. Probably because, as I shared, of those things that 2008 was a huge factor for me. And I just don't know how to even rate my risk, like how risk averse am I don't know. For me, I think probably pretty risk averse. Is
Right,
that going to
right.
be a bad thing for me? Am I going to be too
No, I don't think so.
conservative?
I think so many people, what I see in my practice is too many people are too aggressive, right? They're taking way more risk than they realize they are, or that they should be. I often tell a story. I don't know if I shared this with you, with my daughter. When she was probably 7 or 8 years old, I'm going to guess. So we lived in Southern Oregon. That's where I grew up, and whitewater rafting there on the Rogue River is a big thing. So that was when I grew up. We did a lot of that, and when my kids were little, we did a lot of that. And so there's an area on the river there we would pull the rafts over, and there's these rocks, and you can jump off the rocks into the river. And her brother, who was 3 years older than her, was jumping off the rocks, and she really wanted to jump, but she was kind of afraid. And so she decided she was going to jump. So she and I climb up the rock. There was kind of an upper rock and a lower one. We got on the lower one. And the way I tell the story, right, is hand in hand, dad and daughter leaping into the river. It was this beautiful thing. If you talk to my daughter today, she tells a story about how her dad dragged her up a rock and threw her in a river.
Oh!
Right. So when she was sitting there watching her brother jump, her risk assessment was at one level, right? And this is what happens with a lot of risk assessments in finance, is you're sitting at your kitchen table with a nice cup of coffee with the fireplace going, filling out a risk assessment, right? But when my daughter's toes were hanging over the edge of the rock, her risk assessment was completely different than it was 10 minutes ago sitting down below. And this is the thing. So then 2008 hits, or whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden that risk assessment that you thought you had evaluated when you were sitting nice and comfortable in your kitchen is totally different when you're watching your assets decline. So
Yes.
you have to really, those assessments are important. They give you some kind of a benchmark, but you have to think beyond those things to imagine in your mind, visualize, right? How am I going to feel if I open up my laptop and I see I've lost 40% of that retirement account, or more? right? How is that going to actually make me feel at that time? And really take those assessments into account with the actual experience that you could have. Again, my daughter felt one way about it until she got up on top of the rock, and then she felt a whole different way about it. And that's exactly what's going to happen when we're sitting nice and comfortable filling out that survey. Things don't seem as scary
Mm,
until the intensity ratchets up. And so again, I view my role as a financial advisor isn't so much to tell people what to do or what investments to make, or right. That's part of it, but the bigger part of it is to get my clients to think, get them to think, what do I want? What's most important to me? What are the real risks that I face? How am I really going to feel about them? And then make decisions from that place rather than just almost a tactical. A lot of people approach finance from a very tactical position. Buy
mm,
this, don't buy that, hold
mm.
this, get this kind of rate of return. And certainly that's a part of it. But there's a whole piece of it before that that's much more fundamental, for someone to understand themselves and what's important to them and what concerns they have, what scares them, and build a financial plan from that place, not just from the tactics.
Yes, tactical. That's a word that comes up a lot in some of my uh mentorship group meetings, business groups where we go and talk about our ideas and things like that. I find it easy sometimes to get trapped in tactical things as if it's going to, as if it's the magic tool or something. So I'm glad you said it
Mm-hmm.
like that. Well, I think that I have to look at the clock here, make sure that I'm not keeping you too long. I know you have to help a lot of people today. And I want to, before we go, and make sure I also remember to say, of course, the link is on the episode and the website, but retirewellwithjohn.com. And so, speaking of risk assessments, when did you start sailing? Is this something that you learned as a child or picked up as an adult? I'm so curious.
So technically, I learned as a kid in summer camp. I think I was 11, and on little sunfish, little sailboats. And then I was always fascinated with it. My dad was always fascinated with sailboats, though he never had a sailboat. But he had sailing magazines and videos and stuff in the house all the time. So I kind of was fascinated with it that way. And then a friend of mine invited me to the Portland, Oregon boat show. I think in 2004 or five, something like that. And there was a booth there offering sailing lessons through American Sailing. And so I signed up, took a lesson, and became obsessed, basically. So and today I'm a professional instructor, and I do a lot of sailing, and I now teach people how to sail. So it's kind of a cool, on the financial side, I help people reach their goals in terms of retirement or lifestyle design. But then I also, some of those people are interested in sailing and cruising and doing that whole thing. And so I also am able to share that skill set and those things. So super fulfilling to approach
Ah,
life that way.
I actually was going to say, right, I was actually going to possibly say, I bet you get some people who would say, alrighty, well, I guess that's it, right? I'm just going to close up shop, hand you my portfolio, and can I get on the boat with you? Do you get that a lot?
Not quite that, but yeah, it's very, very, very close to that, right? All right, how do I buy a boat and take off? Right. I want to do this in 3 years, right? How do I get
Yeah.
and I can help them with that, right? There's
Mhm.
there's usually a way to figure that out depending on the circumstances.
What's the longest trip you've been on?
So I do mostly coastal cruising. So 2 to 3 months probably at a time. Most of my cruising is in the Pacific Northwest here in the San Juan Islands, Canadian Gulf Islands, the Puget Sound, and then I spend about half the year in Baja down in Mexico. That's where I do most of my teaching is out of La Paz, Mexico, in the Sea of Cortez. So I've done a lot of sailing in Mexico, the Pacific coast, and the Sea of Cortez, and then been to top places, the Bahamas, British Virgin Islands, those kind of places as well.
Well, it is exciting. And can I see pictures or videos of your instructing?
You can. So that's a whole separate website. It's called cruiseandlearnsailing.com, which is the sailing instruction company that I have. And so there's lots of photos and videos there of some of our sailing experiences.
Okay, very good. Well, retire well with John.com, John Ensley. Anything else that that you would like to share with me that I forgot to ask?
I mean, we've had a great conversation. I'd be happy to have more conversations with you. I know we're kind of running out of time, but there's obviously lots of topics we could get into. But hey, I really appreciate you having me here, Elizabeth, and I hope your audience gets some value out of our conversation today. And if they want to shoot over to that landing page at Retire Well with John and do the assessment and get some information, I hope they do it.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll be looking for some sailing videos too.
Okay, good. Yeah, check them out.
Thank you, John.
All right, thank you.